So let's conclude this module with our first presentation. So we're talking about the emerging revolution in investment and technology with the application on pensions. This will be given by Daniel Mantilla. Daniel Mantilla Garcia is a professor for finances in the University of Administration of Universidad de Los Angeles in Colombia. He is also an associate researcher in the EDEC Risk Institute in France. His research nowadays is focused on the best solutions for pensions and the optimization of portfolios. He was the chief of investigation and research in optimal asset management in California, and he led the research department of Codis International in France. All of his research has been published in a lot of in finances, and he has a PhD in finances, and he has been working in France. He's also an industrial engineer from the University of Los Angeles. Let's give the floor to Daniel Mantilla. Thank you very much. Thank you for your introduction, Alvaro. And I would like to thank the IDB for this invitation, also the AIOS for organizing this event. I'm very pleased to be here with you to discuss some of these topics that I think are core issues in our times, after climate change, of course. So what is this topic? What is this issue? It's the transmission of our pension systems. And all of the systems around the world have this transition going on, especially because the pillars on which they are built have been under pressure, under a huge pressure, to the point in which many of these pillars have collapsed in many countries around the world, in our region as well. We are no exception, unfortunately. But as we know, all of crises have the potential of generating positive change. So the idea is, for example, we have a challenge we are facing, but this crisis situation might make us to start working together. Let's see, this is a great opportunity for the financial industry and for the governments to work together and generate useful solutions for everybody that will really solve the problem of financing all of the functions and all of these annuities. And I would like to give you an example, exactly as I said regarding climate change. Here you can see we have a global crisis that has been produced by a natural phenomenon that is basically, in the case of climate change, is the temperature rise. In the case of a pension crisis, is the aging population. This has caused a lack of balance in the demographics that we have been discussing. And now we can imagine what's going to happen when we have more and more climate change disasters, if we have more hurricanes, floodings. What's going to happen is that the financing and the help from the state will be scarce to cover all of the damages caused by these natural catastrophes. And then we will have less insurance companies that will offer coverage to all of these disasters. Well, the same has been going on with the pension crisis. The states have less and less capacities of giving benefits and ensuring people in their retirement phase. And what's going on is that we have been shifting, making a transition towards defined contribution system. That means that people do not know what they're going to have at the end. Nowadays in the systems, let's say, this implies a transfer from risk, from states and from institutions to the people. What does that mean? In the case of climate change, the problem is that the places we build our homes are not ready for these climate conditions. For example, to endure hurricanes. Maybe we are building houses in places that are going to be flooded. So our systems were not thought to resist this harsh world and these new conditions. The same happens regarding pension crisis. In this case, we're going to have more and more aging population in the world, and the traditional systems, they might be, for example, at state level, or the investment strategies in a private sector are not designed to be able to cover and finance a pension just with the savings of a person for the lifespan of the person. So previously we had many generations and we had a time to recover possible losses that we might face in our portfolios. We also had many people financing the pension for one person, the retirement for one person. So in this new world, we need to reformulate our ideas to see how we can build upon a new system that adjusts to this new world we have. So in this graph, this is from the population, population studies from the UN. Here we have people who are aging. Here we have the orange line. We have people who are going into retirement in the world. Here we have working population as well. That is, what is the percentage of people we need to finance through our employees? Here in 2013, we see more or less in our region, we are going to have people who are going to be older than the world average. So if we used to need a deadline in which we will have a transition, then I will invite you to think about 2030. We should be ready by that time. We should have been doing that transition by that time regarding the new conditions we're living in. So this is a graph of the OECD countries where we see the transition from defined benefits and defined contributions is there, and that trend might not change. So what is the consequence? That our systems are not adapted to the new situation. Here you can see this in a report. Maybe if you haven't read it, I will recommend that. This is from the IDB. We have a present and future of pensions of Latin America and the Caribbean. And here we have the replacement rate of different countries. I selected some of those to show you. And the first thing we can see is the gap you have from the replacement rates of the defined benefits system and the one for the defined contributions. So we see that this rate for replacement is around 30%, right? In the defined contribution systems. So clearly, this is a problem. This is an issue. It is very sad to see when you go to your retirement years, maybe my income will fall from 100% to 30%. Of course, clearly, we need to be working on this. We need to design our systems in a way that this can be, they can be more efficient regarding the financing of our retirement. I also had here some extra information that shows us that we are not managing, we're not controlling the risk of accrued losses, accumulated loss. We should be managing this, actually. So during the crisis in 2008, basically, and the biggest 100 funds in the US went from 80% that had the 90% of financing rates to a 14% of those. So the pension funds at this moment do not have a control system of accumulated loss in place. So that is where we need to go towards. That is what one of the fathers of the theory of portfolio optimization is telling us. That is Robert Merton. He is a professor of MIT. He has a Nobel Prize in Economy, and he is co-author with one of our experts here in the room. So he said that in 2003, actually the situation has not changed a lot. So basically, the only system for risk management that we use in most of pension funds in the world is diversification. But we have some other two techniques that are very important, especially when we're talking about the goal of financing a pension. The risk coverage or hedging, it's important. Talking about inflation, I'm talking also about the change of money in time, the discount rates, and also the portfolio insurance. What is this? This is a technique that allows us to take risk, but at the same time, we will control the accumulated losses at any given situation. So we know we have less time to finance a pension. We cannot allow ourselves to lose a lot of our buying power because we don't know if we're going to be able to recover that, because we just have the lifespan of a person to finance a pension. So we need to be more effective in that control. We cannot simply wait that in the long term we're going to recover. This is not the case. That is the case if we had a shared portfolio. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the products that exist nowadays in most of countries and why these products are not working. And afterwards, I'm going to tell you a little bit what kind of strategy that could work and they are available already, and all of the things that our Professor Merton is discussing. And I have also been researching on this topic that is very interesting, all of these strategies of risk control. So first of all, let's think, what are the strategies or alternatives that people have? Nowadays, we have investment funds that normally have two types of strategies. You have just diversified funds. There was the policy portfolio. We have a set allocation, an asset allocation that was fixed. Maybe 60-40. You have shares and bonds. And nowadays, we have some other strategies. In the US, you have the target date fund. And the difference, actually, is that we have an allocation, we have short-term bonds and shares that start with an exposure to share that is, are greater at the beginning of the career of a person, and then they start diminishing regarding their exposure to the risk. So the advantage of this kind of products is that I have some flexibility, especially people can decide and say, okay, I'm going to change my asset manager, or I have been saving too much for my pensions, I want to use a little bit of money, I'm going to invest in a property. So there is a flexibility. And then at the end, if because of any reason I die before I had planned, then all of these assets just go directly to some other person. They can go to my family. So this has a great advantage, that is, people have control regarding, on their savings. So the problem is, this is a multi-fund, this is target date fund, and these are not designed to ensure people achieving a goal expressed in an retirement income. This is not real terms, this is not connected anyhow. So basically, this is not protecting us against the most important factors for pensions, that is interest rate, inflation, and longevity. None of these are covered by this type of funds. So what is the other alternative people have? We have annuities. That is what the insurance companies are proposing. So this could be, of course, way safer because an annuity gives us what we're looking for when we're investing in a pension, that is to having a cash flow that will grow with the buying power, the average one, at least with inflation, and also covers the longevity risk. This will cover us until we pass away. But what is the problem here? In the US, just around 6% of people choose this annuity when they are there for the 1K. In the UK, annuities were obligatory, but when people were given the option to choose, just 7% of people started choosing that. The problem with annuities is the lack of flexibility. So I do not have any type of control on my savings. This is a contract. I cannot revert the contract. So since it's covering risk of longevity, I will have to pay until the moment I die. So what I also think is that if I'm saving, I'm contributing my whole life to the pension fund, and I'm gonna put all of my savings there in an annuity fund, what can happen is that 2 days later, after I retire, maybe something happens to me. Maybe a bus runs me over, or I have a heart attack, and I die. So all of these savings that have been accrued give me nothing. I can have nothing given to my family. So this is the worst case scenario, right? So very clearly, this is not a good option. Benjamin Franklin used to say that security without liberty is a prison. People like to have control on their savings. So what is the best option? We have a dilemma here. But actually, the good news is that we already have a theory of portfolio that is way more advanced than diversification, and allows us not just to have flexibility but also security regarding income, regarding income and retirement. So to see how we can build all of these options, let's start seeing here. What are we looking for? If this is at the current date, my goal, I am investing with a goal that is ensuring the best income adjusted regarding the buying power, the average one, of course, and at least regarding inflation. And this will be here. Here, I don't need to finance any cash flow, but from my retirement date, I need to have a replacement income until I die. That is an unknown date. But now, if we think that all of these cash flows are regarding life expectancy, and we ask ourselves, do we really need an insurance to be able to insure a cash flow of this type? So the answer is no. We have the fixed income instruments. So this is the payment profile of a bond. But here we don't have any main one, and if I buy this kind of bond will be different because they will not pay any cash flow. This is very important because a bond that starts paying off from the moment I buy it, once I get a coupon, I have the money that I have to reinvest to an unknown rate. Of course, this is a great risk of reinvention regarding so the perfect bond regarding hedging of zero risk of someone who wants to invest in a pension is a bond that will not pay me coupons until my retirement date and the life expectancy for 20 years. So this is a security that is my security. I can transfer that. It's flexible. So if I die on the second day, either way, the value of these bonds might be cashed. So people have this flexibility and this control over this property they have, over these securities and these bonds in most of the savings. And we can complement this with an annuity that is a deferred one, a deferred annuity. Insurance. Or insurance. And actually also we have the risk pooling, that it will be more efficient here because less people will have to be insured at this point, because this is after life expectancy rate. So this is just people who outlive the life expectancy, that will need cash flow in this at this point. So very clearly, this is very important, because if we try to put in the same benchmark the cost of financing of the retirement during life expectancy, then what will happen is that people who have less resources, of course, there are people who live less. So if we try to mutualize all of the payments, then we are not being very efficient, and we are making poorer people, that are the ones who live less, finance those who live more. Those are people who can pay better food, and people who have access to better health systems. So this kind of bonds is basically a retirement bond, that is also known as retirement selfie. That is an idea from Professor Amour, and he has also been working with Professor Robert Merton, and they have been presenting this idea around the world for us to know that with this simple innovation we can solve many problems. Professor Aaron will tell you a little bit about this during his presentation, and I'm very pleased to answer any of your questions regarding this type of bond, because I think this might actually really solve many problems. Now, what is selfie? Selfie is the asset that is free of risk from the point of view of someone that has as a goal a time lapse of retiring. So what are all of these risk-free assets? For someone who wants to retire, for example, what should they do? And at the same time, they want to have an income for the retirement that is insured. So is this impossible? Not really. We have a lot of research being done that shows that this combines the three ways of risk management. We have hedging, diversification, and insurance of the portfolio. And what is this based on? This model. So many of you might know this graph. This is the efficient frontier of optimal portfolios of Markowitz and Tobin. Most of you know this because you know about diversification, but beyond this frontier, then we have James Tobin. He also has a Nobel Prize, and he said, okay, at the moment in which you introduce an asset that is free of risk, your efficient frontier is constituted just by risky assets, and it becomes more efficient. Here you have the green line. So the trade-off, it's going to be more efficient for any kind of risk level you will see. So there is just a point where these frontiers meet. That is when I have the investment of risky assets. But if I want to have less volatility, I have to combine risk-free assets and efficient portfolios. So this is diversification. But at the same time, this is one of the most important lessons we learn from this. So basically, what am I telling you here? So the core message I want you to go with. The idea is to diversify. What they're telling us is better to reduce risk, to have a short-term bond in your portfolio. It's more efficient than trying to use all of correlations to change the weights of portfolio to decrease risk. So you need to leave things alone, and you need to have a little bit of your risk-free assets. So the first message I want you to take home is, if you want to control the losses, you need to do this through diversification. But actually, this could be a very terrible idea. So you need to have risk-free assets to control the losses. So trying to use diversification to control losses is having, for example, is having a soccer team and trying to teach all of players the same techniques. I mean, that does not work. All of the players need to have different techniques. What happens when we have here, maybe you see this is René Guita. He was very famous because he did this scorpion technique, but the idea of doing this is impossible for most of them, just for this guy. So in Italy 90, Colombia was going for the first time to the semifinals, and in the extra time in which we define a classification, Higuita wanted to go and play out with the ball, and we know the sad story. We lost. That's what I can tell you. So the idea is that we cannot use diversification to control losses. This is a bad idea. And the second thing is we need to think, what is really this risk-free asset for someone that has as a goal financing a pension? Remember that the Markowitz model, it was for a period. So this risk-free asset is a fixed income asset that will pay out at the end of the period. This is like a zero coupon bond. So we rebalance this every month or every 3 months. So this chart ratio is just calculated with the interest rate for 1 month or 3 months. This is like a cash. But we are not here investing for a month or for 3 months. But the thing is, we want to finance the consumption in retirement. So from here to 20, 25 years, 30 years on. Or then we need to think what could be the risk-free asset. So we are not trying to maximize here the value of the wealth of tomorrow, but we are trying to maximize the buying power in retirements. So here we have AT, that is the value of my portfolio. LT is the moment I retired, and ET is the cost of an annuity or of this retirement bond by the moment I retire. So this captures how many consumption units for retirement, that is, how many annuities of the same value will I be able to finance when I retire. That is what is important to me. So I'm covering the inflation risks, basically in this, and also the value that I generate in time. So if I have nowadays 100 million pesos, Colombian pesos, in my bank account, but at the time I retire, the inflation rates are lower, then an annuity that I will be able to finance is going to be different. So not taking into consideration all of these changes in the discount rates in my optimization program or in my goal is actually disconnected with the goal of the person. And this has to be a bond that will be adjusted with all of these coupons with the buying power to cover the inflation risk. So what can we do with this kind of strategy? What it does is that it creates the 3 ways of covering risk. That is diversification, that is to cover the risky part, so we can have a good value, that is the performance-seeking portfolio. I'm going to combine this with my risk-free asset, that is the liability hedging portfolio. That is a portfolio that is designed to keep my buying power. So every peso or every dollar that I'm putting in will be the same. The idea is to minimize the risk of losing buying power. And what is the best combination of this? If I want to maximize my consumption retirement, but under the restriction of having a minimum consumption, that is that I can allow myself to lose 10% of buying power compared to what I have today, but not more than that, because I don't know if I'm going to have time to recover all of this by the time of my retirement. Then I need to have a dynamic allocation between these 2 blocks. And that allows me basically that this portfolio will always be above this proportion. For example, 90% of the buying power that I'm insuring at every point of time. So beyond solving all of these problems, I would say this generates as well the idea of communicating to the people. This is very important as well. Communicating the idea of retirement consumption. You can tell people, look, you are insured. You are insuring, for example, this amount of dollars or pesos for today by this date, and this is what people understand. This is what people care about. This is their goal, adjusted to inflation, of course. So we're talking about dollars right now or pesos, and they will be equivalent to so many dollars afterwards. So you can tell people they are insured by this amount of money. So people realize, okay, I need to save a little bit more. I need to have more discipline. But if you do not tell people how much this represents in pension, then they say, okay, it seems to be a lot of money. So here we can compare the alternatives I have mentioned before regarding investment funds. Here we have the target date funds. Here we have the amount of years we have until retirement. Here I have what I have invested in shares. And we have short-term bonds. This is a little bit lower. The problem is short-term bonds are not an asset. This is not a risk-free asset for someone that has a goal trying to finance their retirement consumption. If I really like this, I would like to replace this by an asset that will also actually keep the same value. So let's compare what could be an investment during this 10 years. Here we have the index of bonds of Barclays for 5 years. This is the funding ratio. This comes from the types of contribution funds of defined benefits. And here I'm seeing what is what is my buying power here. That is 11.46%. But maybe this short-term investment had lost more than 40% of their buying power. Why? Because we're comparing here actually with what actually costs to finance the equivalent of these dollars or pesos here into an annuity. So this is related to the cash flows we were talking about. What would be the buying power of a hedge liability portfolio? This has a payment profile we're looking for, so the buying power is always the same. It's steady. It's not going to be above or below. Some other alternative is investing everything in equities. So a colleague from the World Bank that was in Bogota a couple of months ago, they said the best is to have long-term investment and they have no risk. Well, of course, this is related to inflation, but they're totally risky. Here, historically, without having any kind of simulation, we see that it's barely kept the buying power, but it has a volatility of the funding ratio that is very big. That is 30% here, for example. So finally, we're seeing here what would have been the buying power of these two portfolios, this target date fund and the improved target date fund and the liability hedging portfolio with this risk-free assets, and we see this keeps the buying power better. So at the beginning, the target dates are related to the equities, and then they are related to the reserve assets. So this is related to the short term. We see all of the interest rates falling. So this retirement bond actually is like a zero bond coupon that will pay out when I retire. This is like a buy and hold. So I'm going to have it here, I'm going to buy it here, and then have any problem because I will just wait. And a short-term bond, every time I get coupons, I have to reinvest them. So all of the money that is I'm earning this is just a short-term one. So for 25 years, the uncertainty of the rate variation is very big. So this is a risk over time. The problem of having this asset allocation that depends on my horizon, but does not depend on what's going on in the scenario, on how this has been varying, all of the rates, the interest rates on time, and what I saw in my risky block. The problem of this is not controlling the loss of my buying power. I just wait that I'm gonna lose less at the end, but maybe I lost too much in the way and I will not be able to recover. So what we see here is the profitability, the yearly profitability of all of these strategies, and what we see here is that both funds, the target date that has as a reserve asset the liability hedging portfolios, you can have more than 20% loss of the buying power. So this might not happen at the end because in the case of the target date fund, this is improved and might have a loss at the end because I'm investment in short-term bonds that do not cover me in case of inflation. But the strategy that is investment in the reserve assets in the liability hedging portfolio at the beginning of the period will not be able to control the losses, and we don't know if we're going to recover. What are these strategies doing, these dynamic strategies we're talking about? Basically, they guarantee a maximum loss of the buying power at any given time. So we're going to take risks, but under the restriction of keeping the same buying power at a minimum level. So I'm gonna have two limits here. One is 20%, that is my risk budget, and the other one is 10%. So what would have happened in that case? So because of reconstruction, these strategies have as a maximum a 10% or 20% of loss of buying power at any given point of time. So in terms of a relative return or buying power regarding the previous ones, this could have had an improvement in my buying power. You have 100% up to 140% in the case of the strategy that limited loss to 10%. And the ones that limited those to 20%, so the shares were going well at the end. So you have a 30% improvement in the buying power. On retirement, that is what interests me. So these kind of strategies are there. We are launching this kind of index from the EDEC that show us what is the dynamic allocation on time of these kind of strategies. This has been done with an association with Princeton. Here we have two professors that have been working on this. And also, in the industry, we have been launching also some funds that have this kind of non-insurance of portfolio, but at least this is a target date fund in which the retirement asset is a liability hedging portfolio. That is to maintain the buying power in the retirement phase. So this is a lot of changes in the financial technologies we're using nowadays. What we're saying is we are still just using diversification. Okay, Markowitz won a Nobel Prize, but this is with a paper he wrote in 1952. So we have had a lot of changes, and we have different ways of controlling risk that have been developed based on Robert Merton's work that have been showing us this is not the only way to control risk in an effective manner. We have more effective ways of controlling accumulated losses. So, what are we seeing today? Everybody's talking about robo-advisors, the new technology, artificial intelligence. So, let's ask ourselves, what are all of these technologies doing behind all of these algorithms? So very clearly, one of the advantages of using technology is the reduction of costs, lower costs. So we can see as a benefit to reduce the cost, but also to have a better service. So, regarding the cost side, we have a lower cost than compared to a normal asset management, a traditional one. But this is not an improvement, for example, compared to the online brokerage. We have almost the same costs. And regarding the services, we need to ask ourselves, maybe I have an online brokerage, this is like an online pharmacy, I go and buy my medicine online, but I also need a doctor who tells me what is the proportion of medicine I have to take. So, regarding the recommendation on how to invest, these robo-advisors, actually, they are not giving yet, for its most part, for the greatest part, any recommendation that is linked to the goal of financing a retirement. But we're moving towards the right direction because they have strategies that are well disciplined. That maybe if you want to do this with robo advisors, maybe you have to think about this. But either way, these are strategies that are not so empirical. They're based on theory. But we see basically we have betterment here, and we have all of the alternatives of the robo advisors. And we can see the MPT and the theory one. This is regarding diversification. So I would see the only one that is related to efficient frontier, MPT. I would say we have goal-based investing. They are working the best because they're talking about risk-free assets. They're just talking about short-term bonds. We have all of these companies, Dynamic Fund Selection, MPT, they're basically diversified, working with diversification. So the message I wanted to give you was the following. So, of course, we need to do something regarding climate change, into the transition of energy, and maybe building our houses in better places with better methods that are going to be resilient to the stress we're living in. To face the pension crisis, we also need to do something very similar. It's migrating to these new investment solutions that are going to be flexible and that will allow us to improve pensions through investments in risky assets, and that would allow us to improve our income in retirement, but it will also allow us to ensure a minimum income in retirement in real terms. Thank you very much.